Hello everyone, it's all about Sonic the Telltale Gamer. Before this video starts, I would like to apologize yet again for the lack of videos this week. Unfortunately, I'm probably going to put a statement like this on my Twitter too, but for the foreseeable, for the next couple weeks or so, I'm afraid I'll only be able to get about 1 or 2 videos out a week for the next 2 or 3 weeks or so. That's because I'm nearing the end of my first my college semester, and finals are coming up. I've got a lot of final projects I had to do, and it's taking up a lot of my time. So I'm definitely going to be doing at least one Transformers Cyberverse review a week. That's given. But I'm not. Don't expect anything else for the next couple of, I want to say, 3 to 4 weeks. I may end up posting one episode of Batman the Telltale series or Life is Strange 2 ever before then. If Life is Strange 2 episode 2 comes out in between those weeks, I'll definitely upload the rest of Life is Strange 2 episode 1 before then. And then if The Walking Dead the final season episode 3 comes out before then, which I don't think it will, I'll be trying to get Batman the Telltale series and Enemy Within done before, if not before episode 3 is done, released the final season, definitely before episode 4 is released. So, thanks for, listening to me ramble for this little bit, and on to the video. Hello everyone, I'm Autobot Sonic the Telltale Gamer, bringing you something Telltale Games, Transformers, and more. For today's review, we're going to be looking at Transformers Cyberverse Season 1, Episode 10, Maccadams. And yes, I'm saying that as Maccadams. I was previously referred to it as Maccadams, but that's because, if I'm honest, I never, really knew how to properly pronounce it. But this episode clears it up for me. So it's the official pronunciation of this episode's title is called Maccadams. I'm still struggling with it. So, anyway, this episode is, I will say, it's kind of a filler episode. It fills in a lot of plot points that we've kind of been, wondering ever since the series started back in episode 1. But, again, aside from filling in those points, we don't really get a lot of, exposition of, what's going to happen. It introduces some pretty cool characters, and especially one great nod to the IDW comics that I really appreciate. But, yeah, so enough of my little, brief little rambling here. We're gonna go over everything, see everything this episode did right and what it did wrong. So this episode starts off shortly after the events of the last episode, Shadow Striker, in which we see Windblade and Bumblebee still flying in space after Windblade had flown into space to escape Slipstream at the end of episode 8, Terminal Velocity. But Slipstream is back now, chasing them in her own seeker ship, which I assume is she must have your own personal one, and maybe she came in with the Acid Storm and Thrust, because the one that Windblade and Bumblebee have is the one that Nova Storm and Thundercracker had. So anyway, Bumblebee and Windblade are trying to evade Slipstream, but it's not working really but it's at this point that Bumblebee decides to come up with a plan. So while they're flying through space, Bumblebee grabs the Energon rocket launcher that he had found back in episode 7 Cube and does it to jump out of the ship, and then while he's in midair, fire it at Slipstream's ship, which sends it crashing back down to Earth. And then he transforms and drives through space to land back into back into Windblade's ship. So it's at this point, and it's really cool that I gotta give the Cyberverse props, the Cyberverse team, Boulder Media, props for creating this really cool space design. Just their 3D and their background environments are just so colorful and just stylistic, and I really gotta say I love the design here. So after Bumblebee lands and Windblade congratulates him for the impressive skills, Bumblebee says that he can't wait to get back to Maccadams, which shocks Windblade, as this is the first time, not only because he remembers Maccadams, but because it's the first time Bumblebee has remembered a memory without having to jump back into a memory. So, but Bumblebee doesn't really know what Maccadams is, he only knows the name. So after landing back on Earth and landing inside a cave, which for some reason looks like Bumblebee, but don't worry, that will be an important plot point we'll get to in just a bit. Windblade hooks Bumblebee back up to the ship's computer and has him try to remember more memories about Maccadam. This leads into the first of 3 flashbacks this episode, in which follows immediately after the flashback from episode 7 Cube, in which we learn that the oil house that Bumblebee was taking Windblade to where all his friends now is Maccadam. So it's at this point that where we get to see Bumblebee and Windblade interact with a bunch of different characters throughout that we've come to know through Cyberverse so far, and it's really cool to see like all these soon-to-be Autobots and Decepticons interacting. Like we see them talk to Hot Rod and Shadow Striker, who of course this is before the events of Terminal Velocity and Shadow Striker. So Hot Rod and Bumblebee haven't gone to Velocitron yet, and where Blur died, Shadow Striker hasn't gotten into her, hasn't been blown up, so she still has all her regular limbs and all that. The two of them are arguing over the Cube Championship game that happened back in Cube. We see Bumblebee talk to Grimlock. Interestingly enough, we also see at one point Bumblebee talks to Megatron and Optimus, in which Bumblebee really wants to introduce Windblade to Megatron of all people, because he doesn't actually know Optimus right now at this point. So it's before, though, Bumblebee and Windblade go to introduce themselves to Megatron, who Bumblebee's a big fan of, as we saw back in Megatron's My Hero. Optimus is seen talking to Megatron, the fact that Optimus will help Megatron write some sort of speech. Now, now Optimus and Megatron don't exactly say what this speech is, but it's heavily implied that the speech Optimus is writing for Megatron is the one Megatron gives in the second flashback of Episode 6, Megatron's My Hero, in which he announces the Decepticon movement to create a unified Cybertron. Now, this is really, really cool to see that, that Optimus is essentially one of the founding members of the Decepticons in the Cyberverse continuity, something we've never seen before in a Transformers continuity, in which, while we've seen points out that maybe Optimus's actions have led Megatron to start the Decepticon movement, we've never actually seen Optimus be, a willing participant in the foundation of the Decepticons. So I think that's such a cool concept that they're doing here. We also see some pretty hilarious moments of, Wheeljack and, Shockwave, creating, the spider drones that Shockwave would later use throughout the series. We saw them use them to save Shadow Striker back in last week's episode. But we also see the funniest moment in this episode by far is when Bumblebee and Windblade see Soundwave breaking dead down on the dance floor with two other Seekers, and it's just hilarious. I think it's supposed to be a reference to a G1 episode where Soundwave ran this nightclub, and I vaguely remember the episode in my head, but it seems like that they're trying to reference that, but it's just hilarious to see Soundwave, who who I know him best from his appearance in the Aligned and IEW continuities, where he this really serious and calculating character, to see that Soundwave just absolutely busting it on the dance floor. I thought that was just in a hilarious moment. So after Bumblebee and Windblade are done passing by all these characters, Bumblebee takes Windblade over to meet the owner of the bar, Maccadam, who Bumblebee jokes that he's so old some people think he's one of the original 13 Primes. Now this is a really cool piece of Cyberverse lore, in which the Cyberverse lore states that shares the same 13 Primes concept that the Aligned and IEW continuities have, in that the sense that what those continuities have is that before Optimus, there were 13 other Primes that helped form Cybertron, and they all died prior to the events of the comics and or Transformers Prime shows. And then Transformers Prime, it's even rumored that among fans that Optimus is supposed to be a reincarnation of the 13th Prime, but that's just heavily implied and not officially confirmed. But anyway, it's at this point where Maccadam appears and introduces himself to Windblade, and Bumblebee calling Windblade as being Caminus' city speaker, which shocks Windblade as to how she could notice when she didn't tell him, to which Bumblebee replies that Maccadam essentially knows everything. And it's really weird, because after this, Maccadam then tells Windblade and Bumblebee about how they're hiding out in a cave that looks like Bumblebee's head, which really confuses Windblade and Bumblebee in the flashback. But after that moment, when the flashback ends, Bumblebee and Windblade realize that he was actually talking about what they're doing right now in the present storyline, where they're actually hiding in the Bumblebee-shaped cave. So obviously this leads Bumblebee and Windblade to believe that Maccadam could apparently somehow see the future, so they decide to dive back into memories to see if there's any other memories of Maccadam, so they can learn that give hints to the future. The next flashback flashes forward a bit into the future in the early days of the Cybertronian Civil War. We can tell this is because Bumblebee and several other characters have Autobot and Decepticon insignias. Still, though, Maccadam's is serving both Autobots and Decepticons, who are clearly at each other's throats here, and we see Bumblebee walk in with this other mech who has Decepticon logos on him. We don't quite learn his name yet, but I'll get to that in a bit. So anyway, at this point, we also see Windblade talking to Chromia of all femmes at the bar, in which Chromia is seen trying to urge Windblade to leave with her, to help leave Cybertron with her and go back to Caminus, which confirms that in the Cyberverse continuity, Chromia is a Kaminen just like Windblade, which is also something that was similar to her IDW appearance, in which she was also a Kaminen, and also is a reference in the fact that just like in the IDW comics, Chromia in this also wants to leave Cybertron with Windblade and go back to Caminus, but of course Windblade turns her down, saying that that Cybertron is as much of her home as Caminus is, and that she needs to stay here to help fight the sword and protect her friends on Cybertron. So it's at this point that Bumblebee walks up to Windblade, who apparently was kind of angry at him because they haven't talked in a bit, but Bumblebee tries to tell Windblade that he needs to find Optimus so that he can get one of his friends over to the Autobots, and it's at this point when Megatron comes in and calls out for the Decepticon that Bumblebee is with, that we learn that his name is Deadlock. Now, a lot of you might be confused as to why I'm so excited about this character's name, Deadlock. That's actually because you may know him by another name, which is Drift. And yes, that Drift, this is the mech that will later become Drift. So for any of those who don't know, in the IDW continuity and even the Alliance continuity, Drift is, of course, this Autobot who is known for, at least in the IW and Alliance continuities, was originally a Decepticon named Deadlock before becoming the Autobot Drift. So while he's not quite Drift yet in the Cyberverse continuity, it's very likely that we may see Cyberverse's version of Deadlock become Drift at some point. And even better, unlike the Robots in Disguise and Bayverse versions of Drift, which are are based around heavy feudal samurai themes, designs, and have thick Asian Japanese accents. Deadlock's appearance in Cyberverse is actually very reminiscent to his appearance in the IDW continuity, in which straight down to his color scheme and even for the most part his armor is the exact same as IDW Deadlock. And I'll put a little maybe comparison picture of Deadlock in the comics so you all can see what he looks like. It's very, very similar, in which it's not really looks exactly like a traditional Japanese samurai at the time, but more just with a regular mech with kind of samurai themed armor, just a little bit, but not as in your face as it is in the Bayverse movies and Robots in Disguise. So I really love how close to the IW continuity Deadlock looks in Cyberverse, straight down to the white and black color scheme with the red optics and biolights. Deadlock looks absolutely great in Cyberverse, if not a little more simplistic than IDW Deadlock, but again, I haven't really looked at Deadlock in a while in the comics, so my memory of what he actually looks like is not clear. So it's at this point that Megatron comes into the bar with the intention to kill Deadlock for deserting the Decepticons and attempting to join the Autobots. So before he can go to kill Deadlock, Maccadam comes out and declares that there will be no fighting in this bar. And then he transforms into this giant thing that scares everyone, Megatron included. We don't exactly see though what it looks like, but it looks like this really big monster truck looking thing. We don't exactly see what he turns into, but it's enough to scare Megatron away, in which he decides that it's not worth killing Deadlock, so he leaves. And then Maccadam offers to Deadlock to stay at the bar for as long as he needs to be. And while Bumblebee is is impressed by Maccadam, saying how cool that was that he scared Megatron, Maccadam then says it wasn't as cool as what Bumblebee did when he jumped out of a spaceship and fired a rocket launcher, which of course references what happens in the beginning of this episode when Bumblebee used a rocket launcher to knock Slipstream back to Earth, which of course confuses Bumblebee and Windblade at the time. But of course, when the flashback ends, Bumblebee and Windblade realize that again Maccadam saw the future, so they dive back in one more time to see what they can learn. And so the final flashback flashes forward much later. It takes place in between the flashback of Bumblebee losing his voice box at the end of Megatron's My Hero, and before the flashback that we saw at the end of Memory, where Bumblebee leaves on the Ark with Optimus, Ratchet, Grimlock, and a bunch of other Autobots on the quest to find the Allspark. So it's at this point where the war has turned Iacon into a ghost town. Bumblebee and Windblade enter Maccadam's, thinking that it's shut down, but surprisingly enough, even though it's all run down, Maccadam is still there, serving energon to Bumblebee and Windblade. It's at this point that Bumblebee seems to be upset about the fact that Windblade won't go to won't come join him on his quest to find the Allspark with Optimus, Grimlock, and a bunch of other Autobots. And at that point, Windblade explains to Bumblebee that she needs to stay on Cybertron because someone's gonna have to take care of it while Optimus and everyone are out looking for the Allspark. So when they get back, they need to make sure there's still a Cybertron to go back to. And then even Maccadam jumps in saying that Bumblebee shouldn't worry about this and that because even though they'll be gone, they'll still be friends, that they'll meet again sometime in the future. So it's at this point Grimlock calls Bumblebee and tells him that it's time to leave on the Ark, as we saw Bumblebee and Windblade say goodbye at the end of the episode 2 memory flashback. But before they go, Maccadam tells Windblade and Bumblebee that if they want to succeed, they'll have to find the King of the Dinosaurs, which at that point the flashback ends and Bumblebee and Windblade see that they realize what they need to do next is find the King of Dinosaurs. But the only problem is they don't know what a dinosaur is, and that's where the episode ends. Now, obviously, this implies that they're going to be finding Grimlock, and of course, for you to know, Grimlock is the king of the dinosaurs because he is the leader of the Dinobots, which is basically a group of Autobots that transform to the dinosaurs. But it's really interesting to see that so apparently it seems as though Grimlock never had that Dinobot mode when he was on Cybertron, so maybe he'll be it might be like primed or aligned Grimlock, not the Robots in Disguise Grimlock, but the one from the War for Cybertron and Fall of Cybertron games, in which the Dinobots were essentially creations of Shockwave, and that they were regular Cybertronians who were experimented by Shockwave and given these Dinobot forms. So it could possibly that maybe when Bumblebee and Windblade find Grimlock later on this season, which may happen soon, as the name of episode 15 of Cyberverse is called The King of Dinosaurs. So it could be possible that's when they find Grimlock. I believe that when they find Grimlock, he'll be a Dinobot because of testing by Shockwave, but we'll just have to wait and see. Now we're going to get into the cons of this episode, which is really the only bad thing I can say about this episode is the fact that it was really not a lot happened in this episode. I mean, yes, we got a lot of fillers between episodes. We got to learn, we filled in a lot of missing gaps in Cyberverse so far. We learned where Bumblebee and Windblade went after the flashback in Cube. We learned a couple other things. We got a little tidbit into the future where we see how apparently Bumblebee and Windblade are going to meet up with Grimlock at some point before they find all the rest of the Autobots. And we had some cool moments. Don't get me wrong, this episode was great. It's just that, again, not much big stuff happened this episode. It just felt like a bottle episode, and I don't know, just parts of it just seemed parts of it seemed kind of boring, and not say that, and this is a very, very minor con. This episode was great. If it wasn't for this episode would have been a 10 out of 10, just so y'all know. I think this episode was great. I'm really just saying this just so I have a con to say, really. And so, that was my review of Transformers Cyberverse Season 1, Episode 10, Maccadams. If I had to rate this episode, I would give it a 9.5 out of 10. A filler episode, but a great filler episode. We got some really hilarious moments between Wheeljack and Shockwave and Soundwave with the Dancing Seekers. We had some good, interesting plot moments with Megatron and Optimus. We learned the mystery behind Maccadam. We got our introduction to Deadlock, or Cyberverse's version of Deadlock, which I'm really, really happy about. And more relations between Bumblebee and Windblade, as well as we got to see most of Macromia too. It's just really cool, this episode, and I can't wait to see how it really shows that I really think it's really cool how Cyberverse is handling these flashbacks. And I think it's a really cool way to do this show, and I can't wait to see what Hasbro does with it next. So that's it for this week's episode. I'll be back soon with episode 11, Sabotage. If you like this review, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys later.